Hello, y'all. Welcome to episode one of Punk Vacation, a Vinegar Syndrome podcast. This is Chris Haskell. I'll be your host, guiding you through the Punk Vacation journey here over the next, I don't know, hopefully many years. I want to have a podcast that finds the joy in unfettered creativity. I would love to create a podcast dedicated to bringing awareness and context to movies of any budget, from anywhere and during any time period. I've been a subscriber since Black Friday of 2021, have interviewed most of the OCN partner labels, and will continue to push and try to get all of them. I feel like I've been watching VS become this kind of industry powerhouse. They have a partnership with MGM now, so they're in the major studios, and I just want to track and see how high they go. This episode, number one, is coming out around the first of the month. I'm going to put out one episode around the first of each month, looking at the new releases, and I'm going to try to have somebody from Vinegar Syndrome itself on when I do that. Today we're going to be joined by Kurtis Spieler. If you've been listening to my other show, They Live by Film, you'll know Kurtis came on and talked about New York Ninja. He talked about his role at Vinegar Syndrome, so he's certainly no stranger to me or to They Live by Film. But we're going to do something kind of fun. I want to bring different people from Vinegar Syndrome and talk about the new releases. So there was a bevy of releases that came out today, August 1st. We'll cover those. And then what I want to do around the 15th of each month is record another episode after I've watched all of the July releases, because we usually get them in as a subscriber. I usually get them in around the 24th of July. So I'll watch those until around the 15th of each month, do another podcast episode then talking about the movies. So every 2 weeks, you're either getting a preview of kind of what's on pre-order, what just goes announced, or a discussion on what just came out the month before. The goal is kind of twofold. I know there's sort of two kinds of buyers. There's the pre-order buyers, which obviously, there's subscribers, but then there's also people that just roll in day one and pick up a couple titles, certainly want to help you out, provide context if you're in that bucket. And there's also the sale buyers. And, I know y'all will come in and do a big purchase twice a year, 3 times a year. And so I'd love to have a back catalog of episodes that you can listen to in preparation for that. And try to do with Vinegar Syndrome as much as possible. So I'll let Kurtis come on here in just a second. The only other thing we're going to do with this episode around the first of each month is I want to do a segment called Human Tornado. And Human Tornado, we're going to be looking at back catalog titles of Vinegar Syndrome that I think need more attention. So I'll give you we'll do that here in just a minute after Kurtis, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so then Kurtis Spieler, who's a restoration specialist at Vinegar Syndrome, also a filmmaker, also has one of the coolest stories of recreating an old film with New York Ninja, is on here to talk about the August releases. So Kurtis, thank you so much for joining.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Episode one. This is going to go down in infamy.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm excited. This is a cool idea. I like it.
Hell yeah, thank you, man. How are things going? How's Vinegar Syndrome these days? It seems like y'all are crazy.
Always busy. Always busy. I mean, you know, people have seen our schedule. We release a minimum of 4 titles a month through Vinegar Syndrome, not to mention, Cinematograph. Then we have VSU, VSA, all of our labels. And it's a lot of work. So, we keep them going, and, hopefully people keep enjoying them.
They do. I know for sure. Is this right? 8 tabs or 9 tabs open this month. This is a wild month. There's a lot of movies this month.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's hard for me to keep track, and especially we're usually working on stuff months prior to it being released. So when you were like, "Oh, I want to talk about the August releases," I was like, "Oh wait, which ones are the August ones?"
You're also learning at noon Eastern.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. So we're recording this about 6.5 hours after the announcement came out for the releases. This will go up. I'm trying to get it out tomorrow if possible, Depending on editing, it'll be worst case Saturday, but this is coming out either the second or third. Um, I told you, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. I try to do this the first of every month. So if you think of anybody you want me to talk to, or if you just want to come on every month, we'll figure that out as we go. But I love the idea of having people on. So from Vinegar Syndrome, that's really
Sure.
cool for me. Before we jump in, so I gotta ask you, how is New York Ninja going? Because y'all were doing theatrical screenings. You also released another one of his movies through either Vinegar Syndrome or Vinegar Syndrome Archive, but there's another one
Yeah.
of his movies that came out.
Yeah, Ninja in the Claws of the CIA.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was Archive, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
Vinegar Syndrome Archive. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, it's still selling. People are still talking about it, which is great. The hype, the initial hype early on has kind of, died down slightly, but people are still digging it. So it's fun. I'm excited.
that's
Eh,
great. Are there any other projects you're working on or?
There actually is. I can't say too much, but
Oh,
there's actually a couple things in the works. So hopefully by like next year, I should have some announcements. So that'd be
oh
good.
yeah, man.
Yeah,
I can't wait to hear what those are. If
sure.
we already talked about my love for New York Ninja, but I would be very excited to see what you do next. Um, so August,
Yes.
three mainline titles, two VSA, and two cinematograph,
Hmm.
and I think that's it.
Yeah.
Seven. I
Yep.
said nine, so seven titles. Real all over the spectrum, and we'll get into OCN just briefly. Some amazing stuff on OCN this month as well. So right out of the gate, VS 475 is Devil Times 5, which is, first of all, it's crazy to me that y'all are up to release number 475 on the main line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of so I joined the company maybe about, I think I'm on year 6 now,
Okay.
and I can't even remember. I joined somewhere around when like Sudden Fury came out. That was like one of the early titles I worked on, and I can't even think about how far back that was. I mean, that's probably a couple hundred movies ago. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think
Yeah.
about.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you release four movies a month for, years
Yeah,
on end. It
yeah.
goes fast. Sudden Fury is 253. So, yeah.
253. Yeah, so I started probably like a couple months prior to that. So yeah, it's been about, almost a couple hundred movies I've worked on here. So it's crazy.
And so Devil Times Five,
Yes.
475, Sean McGregor movie. Uh, did you work on this from like a restoration perspective? Because this movie's from 1974, so I imagine there's a chance it needed a little TLC.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and we're doing a 4K of it. So usually a 4K involves a little extra work. Yeah, I was pretty heavy on the restoration for this one. It's a great title. I had seen it previous to this. There's a couple other releases that have been put out over the years. I know there was a DVD that was put out, but yeah, we put a decent amount of love into this one. It's a fun little kind of exploitation slasher film. It kind of fits in the category of like child slasher, kids killing adults basically.
Huh?
It's under it has two other titles, People Toys and oh God, what's the other one? I should know this.
I'm just looking it up because the Horrible House on the Hill, right?
That's the one, yeah. So actually I believe the version we put out has the original art card, the original title card, which is that. So we're releasing it under Devil Times 5, but the original print had that, or the original OCN had that title on it. So
Okay. Oh wow. That was so. Is this something that y'all have had in the archive, or is this something that y'all pulled in?
it's something that we pulled in so that sometimes it gets confusing. So, like, if people get confused by the different titles, we sometimes do as well. So, the reason why sometimes movies are released under different titles is sometimes the negative had a certain title card, then they made prints, and then they changed the prints to different titles, or it got released multiple times to try to make more money. So, sometimes it's hard for us to keep track too. So, and then you might release it with the box art having one title, but then because it's the OCN, we want to keep what was like originally there, which was that title. So
Sure.
it gets complicated, but I was gonna say it's just part of the fun.
This is really an epidemic in like Italian movies and in movies from Hong Kong, right? That
Yeah.
they'll have like eight titles, depending on
Yeah.
the market they were released in.
Yeah.
Sean McGregor's got an interesting career. It seems like he's fascinated in kids somehow. He has a movie called November Children, another one called Camper John, and then this one. I don't know what's going on with Mr. McGregor.
Yeah. I don't know either.
He's
Um,
got a little micro genre there.
yeah, I don't to be honest, I don't know much about his previous films, but or other films. That's the one I'm most familiar with, and that's obviously the one we worked on. So,
I'm just wondering now if this is a studio release. This is a cinemation. What is that? What is Cinemation Industries?
I believe it was like a small production company at the time.
Oh, from Jerry Gross. Oh, that's cool. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So there's I think that's the same company that did Black Godfather, if I remember right.
Mm,
The Jerry
might be.
Gross. Anyways, that's cool. Okay, so 475 is Devil times five.
And
Now,
I just want to say, just to chime in, that like I believe it, in my opinion, it looks really good. I think the restoration on this one is really good. We're pretty proud of it. So, if you're a fan of the film, I would definitely recommend upgrading because it looks good. So,
well, there's an incredible amount of special features on this too.
yes.
So I'm just looking at there's Stephen Thrower has an interview. I always love everything that he does. There's the second AD. I found the second AD, which is awesome. Is there puppet work in this movie?
No, not that I know of. What's
Okay.
the
The interview is called puppeteering. I didn't know. Anyways,
But I think that's like a callback to, if you've seen the movie, there's a little bit of like the reason why it's called like people toys is because the kids kind of use the adults as their like puppets, sort of. So
okay.
I think that's kind of what it's about. I'm not
Uh,
100% though, to be honest. I can't remember.
that's awesome. Okay. Yeah, there's a ton of interviews here. It looks like they were able to get, or y'all were able to get, one, two, three of the actors, some producers, the co-director David Sheldon. So I mean, this is awesome. I think this was a New York movie, if I'm not wrong. Or at
I
least the
believe so.
production. You think it was?
Yeah, I believe it. I wasn't trying to think if it was shot in New York, like upstate New York. That I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was like a production out of New York. Yes.
At least the Cinemation, I think I'm pretty sure they're a New York company, so that's cool. Maybe it'd be easier to find some of these folks for y'all because it could be a tough one to find actors and producers and directors, but this is a stacked release, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, we have people that they handle a lot of that stuff. Ewan, Ewan Cant, who works for us, I believe he was the one who spearheaded the special features on this one. And we have a woman named Claudia who does some great work for us. So tracking people down is sometimes it's a job in and of itself. So
Ah,
yeah, we used to do more of that, like myself, Brandon Upson, who works for our company. We used to kind of do some of that. But we're so focused on restoration nowadays that usually the special features we have like a team that works outside of the building that handles a lot of that. So
I mean, if you're putting out 7 titles a month, that's a full-time job, right?
it very much is. Yeah, yeah,
Or maybe two, like you said. That's
yeah,
awesome. So, going to title 476. This is a 1989 movie, which, by the way, I have the hill that I'm going to die on in my lifetime is 1989 was the best year in film.
oh, okay, all right,
It's,
that's a pretty strong statement.
yeah, it's not as common as like some of the stuff you hear, but for the kind of stuff I like, and I think for the Vinegar Syndrome kind of style of movies, it's just like I mean, it's like Action USA. We're gonna talk about They Call Me Macho Woman later, but if you just look at the movies that came out in '89, they're just like so many fantastic films that are really fun and like a ton of creativity. So, anyways, Hell's Trap is another one, 1989.
Yes,
Um, this is let's see, this is a film from Mexico, right?
yes, yes,
So I'm just trying to find the Mexican or the Spanish title, Trampa Infernal, right?
yes, yep,
Yeah. Let's see, and you said you have archival positives. So this was released on archival positives.
yes.
So do you remember this one at all?
Oh yeah. So this was interesting. Y- since I've started working at Vinegar Syndrome, we've been doing a lot of more Mexican horror, Mexican exploitation, which is great because it's actually a genre I'm not super familiar with. So a lot of the Mexican titles I'm discovering as I'm working on them,
Okay.
and we've put out some really great titles. I'm trying to think. Grave Robbers we put out like years ago. Cemetery of Terror. These, some people are familiar with them, but yeah, it's great that we're jumping into like Mexican exploitation, Mexican horror. This particular title I actually really like. I'm a sucker for slasher movies,
Okay.
and this one is kind of a little bit different in the sense that it's kind of like a survivalist type horror slasher. So anybody that's listening to this, if they're seeing the cover art on our website, you kind of see a killer in a mask, and he's got like a claw similar to like a almost like a Freddy Krueger type
Yeah.
claw. But he also uses a lot of guns in the movie, which you don't generally see in a slasher film. So it's a group of friends getting stalked and killed by this slasher type character who's got a mask, claws, and carries guns. So it's fun. It's got its cheesy moments, but like I said, I'm a slasher fan, so anytime I can see a new type of slasher, a lot of it takes place during the day, which kind of again gives it this like survivalist horror kind of
Okay.
feel as
Yeah.
well as the slasher movie. But I'm it's probably one of the titles I'm most excited for this month. So
There's a I love this movie. The name's just escaping me now that we're talking about it. There's an Arrow title about with where the killer has a meat hook and he's going after folks on this island. It's like in the middle of a storm and he's just
oh
knocking up kids one by one.
yes, oh God, why am I drawing a blank? I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'll think
It-
of the name here in a second.
yeah,
But just like you, I love like new instruments in a slasher movie. It's good.
yeah,
It's it's gonna kill me because it's got this fantastic theme song too. Anyways, so okay, Hell's Shop sounds awesome. I,
yeah.
I'm sold. And plus, Eduardo Galindo is a pretty. Y'all have done at least like you mentioned two titles. You've done at least two or three titles of him. Um,
Yes. Well, the Galindo family. So I'm trying to think. This might.
oh, okay.
It's the whole family. So there's a number of Galindos.
We have 475 is Devil times 5. Then 476 is Hell's Trap. And then we get to one that looks really fun, which I have to admit I don't know as much about, but it's called Bloodbath at the House of Death
Yes. Yep.
from 1984.
Yep.
Uh,
So this was a new discovery for me as well. It's a British horror comedy.
yeah.
So I know, some people like horror comedies, some people don't. This one is definitely, there's different types of horror comedies. There's the ones that kind of are a little sillier, like we've put out Wacko and Pandemonium, which
Mhm.
are like kind of airplane style, and this fits in that category where it's like over the top kind of humor, a lot of visual humor, that kind of stuff. But yeah, the background on this one, I don't know a ton about it, but it's there's a lot of British comedians. I wasn't familiar with who a lot of them were, but it seems like they almost like kind of like a British comedy troupe, who got together and made this movie together. And it's interesting because there's actually some really good like kind of kills and gore and stuff in there. So from what I understand, listening to some of the commentaries and whatnot on the film, um, they were hoping to get it to like more of a mainstream audience, but because of the British censors at the time, some of the gore kept it ended up getting a higher rating than they hoped it would get. So it ended up kind of falling by the wayside because it didn't really fit into a specific category. And so this is a good chance for people to discover it now. I enjoy it. Vincent Price is in it. It's great to see him in a more comedic role, which is
Yeah.
interesting. But it pokes fun at the slasher genre, and there's some good kills, some good gore, and some funny moments. So yeah, I recommend it.
So Barry Cryer is one of the creators here.
Yes,
That dude is, I mean, he's up there for one of the most prolific kind of comedians in English history, I think.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I wasn't super familiar with who he was at the time, but from learning more about the movie while working on it, yes, yeah. And I believe was this his only film, if I remember right.
As
Like
far
his
as director,
yeah.
let's see. So I think he's a writer on this, not a director.
Oh, okay. That might be,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So the director is, I'm just looking at this guy named Ray Cameron, who is also, I think, a hyper active um, writer. But you're right. He only has a few directing credits. So it looks like he's just got this is the only movie. Yeah, one of them was a video, but this is the only film
Yeah.
from Ray Cameron. Yeah, but those guys. Randomly, I grew up in the UK, so for well, at least when I was like really young, from like 1989 to 92, I was over there. I mean, when I was 7, I wasn't watching TV like British comedies or understanding them, but I've always kind of had an affinity for that just because I was around it for my formative years. So I've seen a lot of the shows. There's a show called Kenny Everett that they did, which was really funny. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah,
this is
yeah. Yeah, there's a like a historical commentary on there, and they talked a lot about like his background, and I believe they talked about that show. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Again, like I don't know if all the comedians had worked together on other stuff before, like television and whatnot. I can't really remember, but it almost kind of gave me like Reno 911 vibes, where it was
yeah,
like these guys that kind of knew and girls who knew each other and worked on stuff, kind of all got together to make this movie. That's kind of the vibe that I got from it.
that's awesome. You know, there was something done through the Labs line, the
Hmm.
VSL, called Guest House Paradiso.
Yes.
It wasn't I wouldn't say it was a horror necessarily, but it was pretty funny. It was a really funny movie. Um,
Yeah, kind of a similar thing. What's his name? Who was in Shaun of the Dead?
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's one of the core duo there.
yeah, but it was a similar type thing where it was like
Simon Cowell,
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg.
Yeah. Similar kind of thing where it was like friends who had, comedian friends who had worked on shows and other movies together kind of got together to do that film. And yeah, that's another fun one. Um, but this one, Bloodbath in the House of Death, kind of leans more on the horror side. So hence
Okay,
being released through our mainline Vinegar Syndrome.
nice. Plus Vincent Price hamming it up.
Yeah.
You gotta check it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now some of the ones that caught my eye, the way I've just seen a lot more kind of Asian films, I guess, in my life. So the two from Vinegar Syndrome archive line this month, I was super excited about. I can't believe, I mean, I shouldn't say that anymore because Vinegar Syndrome is y'all are kind of a force to be reckoned with now, but I was stunned that y'all got The Enforcer. That's the awesome get.
Yeah, yeah, no, we were pretty excited. So this is our first Jet Li movie. Now we've released it under the original title, which is My Father is a Hero.
Sure.
And so anybody who's watching this, if you don't know that, a lot of people might know it under the American title, which is Jet Li's The Enforcer. But this is the original title. This is the original Hong Kong version. And yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm a Jet Li fan. Who's not a Jet Li fan? You know?
He's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, so I'm excited to get one of his movies. If you haven't seen it, there's a lot of obviously good fight scenes, good wire work. Um, there's a boy in the film who plays the son of Jet Li's character. I can't remember his name offhand, but he is very good, and there's some good martial arts with him as well. You don't tend to see a lot of like martial arts with kids, so that's very cool. Yeah, it's fun. There's a lot of drama between the father and son dynamic, but it definitely pays off in the fights, and so I recommend it.
Well, the director is Corey Yuen,
Oh yeah.
and y'all have done a fair amount of his titles now.
Yep. Yep. Well, he for people that don't know, he's a director and a martial arts choreographer. He does some acting every now and again as well. In Hong Kong, a lot of these guys they work on all different productions and different levels. It's a much tighter knit community over there, so you'll see guys working on each other's films in different different positions and all that kind of stuff. But yes, for Yoon, he we've released a lot of his movies. I enjoy his work as a director. I think his camera work is really interesting. He usually has like high energy camera work mixed with like high energy fight scenes. And being like an action choreographer, I think he also has learned how to shoot action as a director well too. So you can kind of combine both of those together, and his fight scenes are usually pretty kinetic and enjoyable to watch. So, and there's both martial arts, but also gunplay as well for people that are into that. So, I highly recommend it. Also, not to spoil anything, it's not a spoiler, but there is a fight scene near the end where Jet Li actually uses his son as a weapon, which is not something that you see in a lot of movies, and it's amazing. So I highly enjoyed that part.
That's amazing. Do you were you part of the team that got Wang Jing to interview? Because that's kind of an amazing get.
No, so we do have people in Hong Kong that we
Okay,
work with.
okay,
So you know, it's very, again, the I don't know how to explain it, but it's very tight knit over there.
okay.
So you kind of have to have an in. But
Mm.
we have people in Hong Kong that we've worked with who are able to set up these interviews for us. And yeah, no, we were excited about that.
That's kind of my that I just found out my future dream job is to be your Hong Kong guy. That would be an amazing job.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be cool.
I need to get on the inside first. Um, but speaking of Hong Kong, so one of my favorite comedic mm, names, I guess, in kind of Chinese cinema and especially Hong Kong cinema is Stephen Chow.
Mm. Mhm.
And y'all are finally putting out, or not finally, but you're getting to put out a Stephen Chow movie.
Yeah, yeah. So I was very excited about this. Love on Delivery is the
Yeah.
title. So you know, some of the audience listening to this might know who Stephen Chow is. He's most known in the US through Shaolin Soccer and
Mhm.
Kung Fu Hustle.
Yeah.
But in Hong Kong, he was a comedian. But he's also, he does like martial arts and all this kind of stuff in his films. Usually his martial arts tends to be a little bit more in the comedic style,
Yeah.
or over the top. So yeah, we were excited. I mean, I'm a fan, but to be honest, I'm not familiar with a lot of his earlier work. So when I was working on this was the first time I had seen it. And it's a very fun movie. It's definitely leans more on the comedy side of things. Um, have you seen this title? Are you
I
familiar?
so I haven't seen I've seen randomly I've seen the sequel.
Okay.
But he's not for everybody. I think sometimes when people watch Stephen Chow movies, they're like, he's so silly. But I love it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love his comedy.
Yeah, this one's interesting because it's kind of like your classic underdog story. He's like
Yeah.
trying to impress this girl, and he's trying to learn martial arts, but he's learning martial arts from this guy who is basically scamming him out of his money. So he's like teaching him things that aren't actual real martial arts skills. And so
Uh,
there's that comedic element to it. But Stephen Chow, he kind of usually plays that like down on his luck type character who has to kind of overcome something, and usually for love or something to that extent. There's a lot of pop culture references in this. Some of them I got because if you're familiar with Asian culture, Asian films, you'll get a lot of them.
uh-huh.
I'm assuming there's a lot that still also went over my head, but there's a lot of pop culture references. But it's a very energetic film. It is funny, even if sometimes Hong Kong comedy can be different than American comedy, but
Yeah.
it's still very funny. So I recommend it to anybody. And the fight scenes are a little bit more cartoonish and over the top, but also again very fun. The camera work is very good. And it kind of is like a prelim into the things you would see from Stephen Chow later on in his film career. So we're excited. This is definitely a little bit different for us. So if the audience is excited, like definitely pick it up. If you like it, we'll do more. But it's slightly different tone for us. So I hope people enjoy it and pick it up.
Well, you did the right thing in getting Frank Jang to do a commentary because I can only imagine how he breaks down every single cultural reference and every single nuance to that.
Yeah, he did, which was actually helpful. I was working on the commentary, and there was the things that he would bring up that would be like, "Oh, I get that,"
Yeah.
because sometimes things don't always translate well, or sometimes it's a play on words, and of course
Right.
that doesn't always translate with subtitles. So, but it was nice to have him kind of break down some of the cultural references, and so if you do watch it and you do like it, I do recommend watching the commentary as well. You might actually get a little bit more out of the film.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about Frank Chang. I mean, he's just so, I mean, he's from the area and he's an historian and he's it's he's so amazing at breaking down these kind of linguistic nuances that we would never get otherwise. And subtitles, it's impossible to pick up, some little obscure cultural reference that was hot for 2 weeks in 1996 or whatever, but
Right.
he'll bring it in and
Yeah.
it makes the movie that much more alive. Um, I'm so excited about. I saw it. Funny enough, I saw Shaolin Soccer at a Asian movie festival, Asian film festival back in 2001, 2002, whenever it came over to the U.S. I can't remember exactly what year. And I was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And so I just started looking, and he has some, as any filmmaker, he's got some ones that aren't amazing, but most of his, if you like his style, most of Stephen Chow's movies are pretty consistent. And like the thing that I always like about him specifically, but a lot of the Hong Kong, I guess, performers, is I don't know if he came from Jackie Chan's that same kind of classical training, that school of like classical theater and classical, kind of Chinese ballet, but like their martial arts is amazing. Like Stephen Chow is he's not just I mean he is a comedian, but his physicality is incredible.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, his physicality, because he does a lot of like physical humor beyond just like the martial arts and beyond, just the like slapstick or whatever. But there's actual like physical humor that's fun and funny. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I recommend that. It's you know I actually it was funny to me. Like it made me laugh, which is when you're working on these movies over a period of time, you have to watch them multiple times. And sometimes, after you're watching the movie for the third, fourth time, maybe even more, they can get a little bit daunting at times. But
yeah,
something like this, it's high energy, it moves, it's endearing, it's entertaining. So yeah, I enjoyed it every time. So
that's awesome. I just want to before we get into the cinematograph titles, I just want to pause for a second and like just kind of like give y'all credit. I mean, I guess you're calling cinematograph a sub-label, so this will fit into that as well. But you're even since the 3 years now I've been a subscriber. I just feel that I don't know if it's a combination of like different personalities coming into Vinegar Syndrome, or just you have more money so you can go to bigger budget projects. But like the titles y'all releasing are legit amazing. Like to get Love on Delivery and to get The Enforcer, that's amazing. Like those are I hope they sell well for you, but like just to have that restored and preserved, and a nice copy of that sitting on my shelf is like I, I don't know. I don't know who else would be doing that. So it's just awesome.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we try to hopefully give something for everybody, and Cinematograph, it's a new label for us. It is like an in-house label. We do the restorations here. Some of our partner labels are their actual partner labels. We just work as the distributor, but
Mhm.
something like Cinematograph is handled in-house. Justin Liberty, who works for us, some people know who he is. He kind of is spearheading Cinematograph for the most part, and the brief description for it and the reason why we decided to do it. We've been working with more studios recently, and there are a lot of titles out there that may not necessarily fit with the Vinegar Syndrome branding, but they're still good titles that we'd like to see released and
Oh yeah.
restored. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing under Cinematograph are like these studio titles that really haven't gotten a lot of attention and are worthy of it. So we've been really lucky to do it. I'm excited. A lot of people have been excited about that line. I myself am excited. Just about everything we've put out under that title so far, or under that label so far, has been really exciting. So,
Well, let's get into it then because this month is no exception. So I think just going in order, we should do Joyride first.
mhm.
So Joyride is number 7, and it's a movie from what's the guy's name? Joseph Rubin, right?
Ruben. Yep.
Yeah. And funny, he's done some fairly decent movies, but I think most people that would follow Vinegar Syndrome would probably know him from The Stepfather, I imagine, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I mean, he's had some fairly big uh one of his movies I was reading grossed like $150 million. I mean, he's had some big projects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, he's the director of The Stepfather. That movie's awesome.
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's so good. So Joyride is a movie with uh, what's sorry,
Oh,
what's his name?
Des
Desi Arnaz,
Desi Arnaz Jr. Yep. And
Lonnie Griffith,
yep.
and then one of the Carradines, Robert,
Yeah, Robert.
right?
Yeah, because Keith is in the other one.
Yeah, he's
I
in the
think
other one.
Robert's in this one. Yeah.
It's a Carradine month.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen the movie, but I'm excited about it. So there's these kids get together and they're like gonna go pick up and set up a business or set up life in Alaska, and then things kind of spiral out of control. That's the premise, right?
Yep, that's the basic premise. Yeah, three friends decide to like give up their lives and in this well, I would say in the States. I mean, Alaska is one of the states, but they decide to give up their lives where they live and try to make it up in
Uh-huh.
Alaska. And it's interesting because they're like fresh out of college, so it's like this kind of coming of age sort of film, but there's also some like dark elements to it, and there's like some violence in the film as well too. So it's definitely an interesting film. This is the first time I had seen it was working on this one, and it's a drama, but it's got almost kind of a bit of a noir vibe at times. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. I wasn't sure when I was watching it for the first time. We work on the restorations, but then when sometimes it's different when you're doing the restoration versus when you sit down to actually watch it and
I'm
QC.
sure.
And so when the first time I got to sit down and actually watch it, I wasn't really sure where it was going to go at times. So it's an interesting film. I very much enjoyed it. So I recommend it.
There's no mention on the website about if you had like the OCN or if you had the negatives. Do you remember this restoration at all? Not to
Uh,
put you on the spot.
I don't, but I'm pretty sure that was OCN. I
Right.
believe most of the stuff that we're doing under cinematograph, depends. Well, it depends. Studios sometimes didn't always save the OCN. Sometimes
No,
it was interpositive a lot for those. So, I don't want to say because I'm not 100%. I'd have to double
it's
check.
okay. But are the studios, they don't do the restorations? Y'all actually do them? Y'all get the film and do it in-house?
A lot of times, yes.
Oh,
It all depends. Sometimes some of the Hong Kong releases, like the studios over there, will do the restorations. We might try to do another pass or clean them up or fix things that we thought could use improvement. But the stuff under cinematograph, we've done all the restorations on those.
oh,
So
cool.
yeah, yep.
Adam Terrell was mentioning he was on a podcast with Sam Deegan, um, Eros Plus Massacre one she just put out, and he was talking about how in Japan they don't really have 4K scanners.
Mm.
They still mostly scan in 2K. So do you ever run into things like that where they'll be like, okay, we restored it, and you get it in, and you're like, okay, well,
Yeah, I mean there are sometimes some problems, or sometimes it was an older scan.
yeah,
Sometimes we'll try to request new scans if we can. It's just it's difficult. Every studio is different. Dealing with studios is obviously much different than dealing with like an independent producer or an independent director. If we try to get the materials in our hands as much as humanly possible, but a lot of times foreign films it's hard to get our hands on those, or sometimes the studio will do the scan, we'll get the scan, and then we'll do the restoration. So it's kind of on a case by case basis.
do you grow attached to these movies as you're going through and doing the restoration on them?
Yeah, yeah, sometimes, yeah. I mean, especially like if it's a title that I'm a fan of
Yeah,
previously, like when we did Navy SEALs a few months back. That was exciting because I grew up as a fan of that movie. And
yeah.
so to be doing it and to be going through and cleaning it up and doing the restoration, like you feel attached to the movie. It's like So it's like this weird thing where you don't think of it. Like when I was a kid watching Navy SEALs, when I would have never imagined that, whatever, 30 years later, I'd be working at a company restoring the original negative and, making like a pristine version that hopefully will get seen for years to come. So you can't help but feel a little attached to them.
That's great, man. Well, and that was a VSU title, right?
That was a VSU, yeah.
I'm sure it, yeah, yeah,
And to be honest, and it's not even just a big thing. It's sometimes the little films I almost sometimes become more attached to the little films because sometimes they take more work. You're rescuing them. They may not have been
right.
seen by a lot of people, so you're kind of getting them out there for like a wider audience. And so sometimes the little ones you feel like a little bit more connected to because you're like, yes, I want to see this do well. Like I'm excited it's getting out there. So
Hell yeah. Well, I want to come back to right after we talk about Altman's one of Altman's masterpieces. I want to get to one of those ones that's underseen.
sure.
Well, funny enough, I mean, you could argue that Thieves Like Us is kind of underseen too. That there's an argument there. So, how exciting was that when you realized you were going to put out an Altman film?
Yeah, no, that was exciting. It's weird because again, for Vinegar Syndrome, like we're always getting new titles. We're always like new, I don't want to say like milestones, but it's like, oh, this director, we've never put out one of their movies, and now we are. Like that's
Yeah,
crazy. And so yeah, having an Altman film was cool. Uh yeah, I mean, Thieves Like Us, I mean, it's a great movie. It's sort of a remake of They Live by Night,
yeah,
which I'm assuming you're a fan of.
yeah. We
So
know it well.
yeah, so it's for people that haven't seen it, it's definitely like like a depression era noir. It takes place in the 30s. It has a noir vibe, and it's about this group of guys that are robbing banks through like the Midwest, and young Keith Carradine is in it and a young Shelley Duvall. And there's like a relationship aspect, and then there's the robberies and the kind of going on the run and all that kind of stuff. It's a character driven drama, but at the same time, has these like bank robbery elements, has these noir elements, and I really enjoy it. Obviously Shelley Duvall just recently passed away.
Yeah,
And
right.
I gotta say, like, this was like a really good role for her. Like I saw her in kind of a different light in this role. Um, I don't know, she's really likable in this, and like
Yeah,
she plays this character who's kind of like she's likable and naive, and she, is kind of getting involved with this, Keith Carradine, who's like this, criminal, but
yeah,
I don't know. There's just something like endearing about her throughout the film, and so I just wanted to kind of give a shout. I love Keith Carradine; his work is really good, but
sure.
I kind of feel like Shelley Duvall steals the scenes in that she's in this one. So
Her and Sissy Spacek, I think, are two people that when they play like quiet Southern roles, it just feels, I don't know, it just feels like a natural fit for them. Like they
yeah,
do great with it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I like I said, I don't know. I was impressed. She impressed me the kind of the most out of the film. So
It's great. And this is one, it's been a while. I haven't seen this on a nice transfer. I saw this on maybe even VHS or I don't know, maybe like an early DVD or something. But doesn't this have a like a French New Wave cinematographer or something? Like it's a beautiful film, right?
yeah, no, it's really well shot. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
I don't know, I have like ties to like memories of this being like a very beautiful film. I'm excited
uh,
and I love
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of who. You might be right. I'd have to check to see who the cinematographer is, but yeah, it definitely. So there's a lot of like open fields, a lot of kind of like Dust Bowl kind of vibe to it, where you see these large landscapes. It's a lot of like these gas stations in the middle of nowhere kind of vibe.
yeah.
There's a desolate kind of feel to it, but everything is still like still well shot, and the framing, everything. It's really nice. I like it.
That's great. I just it's just so awesome. Like this I don't want to say I predicted this because I would never be so, arrogant as to say that I knew the business of Vinegar Syndrome, but even a couple years back, I was just thinking the quality of releases that y'all are putting out. So one of the things I'm going to talk about when you drop off, you're happy to give your opinion if you'd like before you leave, is this Ozploitation movie called Body Melt
No, yeah, yeah, yeah,
from a few years back.
yeah.
And like the kind of love that y'all gave to Body Melt 5 years ago or whatever it was, I was just like, nah, they're gonna do bigger things. I just like you can't do, there's that old expression about the way you do anything is the way you do everything or
Mm,
something like that.
hmm.
And it's just like y'all have always been consistently putting out high quality releases and understand the collector's mindset. And that's why I'm such a big fan. That's why I'm doing this podcast, is I feel like every title I get from y'all, even if it's Dr. Jekyll's Dungeon of Death, which I want to ask you to give your opinion on it in case it's not positive. I think that movie is horrible, but even that movie, it's still a fun release, and it's like an event to get it in, and it looks good on the shelf, and like I'm still happy to have it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, sure, not everything is going to be for everybody. I mean, we even here have our debates as to what's good and what's not.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know sometimes people are confused as to why we have so many like sub labels under the Vinegar Syndrome branding. The partner labels are one thing, but the actual like sub labels, so like the
Mhm.
VSL, the VSA, the VSU, and and I know it can get confusing for people and they don't really understand why, but I mean the basic reason is kind of what you were saying, is that we are about film restoration and preservation, and we're always discovering new things that we want to put out, we want to restore, and we want to expose them to a newer audience, but not everything fits under the Vinegar Syndrome branding.
Yeah.
And we've built a core audience, and I think there's a certain expectation of the types of films that come out through Vinegar Syndrome, and so we don't want to get away from that. But then when you get access to a title that you're not really sure where it belongs, where our subscribers, if they got in the Polish films that we've been doing under VSL, if we release those under VS, the fans may not be happy about that. So we don't want to not give them a chance to get out there and be exposed to a new audience. So, something like VSL, Vinegar Syndrome Labs, that's become kind of this place for like, yeah, like where would we put these Polish dramas, these or Polish sci-fi dramas that,
Uh-huh.
that
Uh-huh.
like, but people are very excited about them and there is an audience for them and we want to see them released. So, hence Cinematograph, same thing. So we just try to find places to put these films, and, you know, uh, Vinegar Syndrome Archive, even though it wasn't our intention, has kind of become our action line. It's not really how it started, but it's where it's become, and a lot of our Asian films get released under that. But like historically, for us, for Vinegar Syndrome, action really wasn't a strong seller for us
Yeah.
early
Okay.
on. So we had access to these films, and we wanted to put them in a place where audiences could still see them. So um but every once in a while, some titles, if they do well and we start to see audiences wanting more of them, they might kind of trickle into the VS world. But VS is exploitation, it's horror, it's that's kind of what it has been, and we don't want to stray too far from that. So
Well, my favorite thing recently in the VS line is kind of sticking with the spirit of a Vinegar Syndrome title, but expanding maybe the geographical scope or something. So, like, I just watched Chinese Torture Chambers story,
yeah, yeah.
and that movie is, first of all, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. Anybody listening to this, like, don't let the title like scare you away. Like, I think a lot of people think that it's gonna be this like whatever gross out just torture film. It's
Uh-huh.
actually really not. It's sure there's some torture, there's some rough stuff in it, but there's also it's very comedic. There's an amazing, I know you know what I'm talking about. There's an amazing sex scene, like a wushu sex scene where people are flying through the air. It's off the wall. And to be honest, it's one of my favorite releases that we've done recently. So if you are listening to this, please pick it up. It is so much fun. I really enjoy it.
I feel like I'm in sales for a living, and I've just seen a bunch of movies, and the combination of those two things, I joke that I'm dead inside sometimes. Like I
Mm.
just just to kind of get through life. Like it's hard to surprise me. I was howling when the woman in the wuxia sex scene yelled oral attack and jumped into a standing 69 with this dude, and then
Yeah.
they just started fucking all over the force. I was
Yeah.
like, I it just floored me. It's
Yeah.
just amazing and
Yeah.
very funny
The,
more than torture.
oh yeah, there's a music cue too that I can't give away, but there's a
I know
music
exactly.
cue that comes in at like the perfect moment, and the first time I saw it, I bust out laughing. I was like, this is
Yep.
unbelievable. It's
It
hilarious. It's
it
great.
took my breath away.
Yeah.
The second movie is probably a little closer to like what people would think a movie called Chinese Torture Chamber Story would be. It's a little bit rougher,
Yeah,
but
the second one doesn't have the same level of humor as the first one.
yeah.
But it's a good movie and it's a little bit more character drama driven. I would say the torture is probably maybe a slightly heavier in the second one, near the end. But yeah, I mean, the tonal shifts in the first one are kind of almost like breakneck, but
Oh yeah.
I think it also works at the same time. And Hong Kong movies are kind of known for that. They might be like
Right.
comedies at one moment and then serious dramas and then violent and whatever. But yes, I cannot recommend Chinese Torture Chamber Story enough. It's one of my favorite movies, and I don't want people to be scared away from the title. Like, please watch it. It's so good.
And my other than the movie, my favorite thing about that release is the video essay of breaking down. Erica Schultz did an
Mm,
incredible job of like it's like an academic paper on the history of Chinese torture, but like she finds the documents and she finds like the manuscript. I was blown away that this video essay goes that deep.
yeah, yeah, no, that one was pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, luckily we've had access to good people, like the historians and stuff. Sometimes the commentaries that are on these discs, I'm impressed. I'm like, man, where'd you find all this stuff? Like, I'm sitting there listening to it, going like, oh yeah, really? Oh, I didn't know that. That's so cool, And
Yeah,
here I am,
yeah,
like
yeah.
working on the movie. But yeah, it's cool.
Curtis, this is exactly what I had hoped it would be. Thank you so much for making some time for this. I did say that after you drop, I'm going to talk about Body Melt and shine some light on a catalog title. Have you seen it by chance?
Body melt.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. No, that was yeah, that was again one of the early ones that I worked on when I started here. So yeah.
My any I'm gonna give a little bit of a breakdown of it and kind of talk about it, but any initial opinions on it from your side? Is it a movie you like?
Yeah, oh yeah. So I had never seen it before,
Uh-huh.
and I believe so. I'm trying to think what year. Do you remember the year that came out? Like, was it 90 or
93, I want to
93?
say.
I want to say that was one of our. I think it was the first times that we broke into the 90s at the
Oh,
time.
cool.
We have released movies in the 90s now, plenty of them. But at the time, I want to say, I don't quote me on that, but I believe if it wasn't the first, it was one of the few at the time that was into the 90s. So that was like interesting because, some people have a negative opinion of 90s films. And there are some really great 90s films out there, and I'm glad we've been able to put some of them out there. But yeah, Body Melt, Australian kind of sci-fi horror. It is wacky and definitely some gross scenes in it, but like gross in a good way, I think. So yeah, very enjoyable.
I put it up there next to something like Society as far as just having like a lot of gross effects.
Yeah, yeah, no, Society is probably a great comparison for it. Yeah, yeah, very cool.
But and also the backstory for Philip Brophy is just fascinating to me. Like the Australian Andy Warhol.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
he's a fascinating guy. But Curtis, I don't really have anything else. I mean, this is thank you for
Well,
giving up some time last minute. What else? What
well,
else?
did you want to? I think you want to talk about Macho Woman. Is there time for that, or do you want to move
Hell
on?
yeah, there's time for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so they call me Macho Woman. I had, y'all have done 200 films from Cynthia Rothrock,
Yeah.
and they're fun. Like I always enjoy
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But when I saw there was a different woman on the cover of a VSA title, I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's gonna be like another Cynthia Rothrock kind of person that I'll learn about and get to know. That's cool. And I put it on, and from basically like minute one, I was just like, oh no, this is different. And I was glued to the screen. This is exactly the kind of movie that I love. Like over the top baddies, they don't really like the way that the the severity of the evil in the film doesn't really match with like what's going on and the speed in which the woman becomes like a housewife to becoming like a the predator doesn't really make sense. It's just kind of like everything is just written for convenience, but in like the most perfect and beautiful way possible.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, yeah, because it kind of plays out like something you would expect to see in like a 70s exploitation film,
Yeah,
almost like a kind of and I spit on your grave, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a more fun, kind of lighthearted element to it where you're right, like the bad guys are doing bad stuff, but there's still like this kind of comedic vibe to the whole thing. And then like, yeah, she goes from like, oh, woman getting attacked to woman doing the attacking. And but the transition, like, is yeah, it's kind of almost surprising how quickly she kind of goes into that mode. And then when she
Yeah.
does, it's just like it's full on just kick ass. And yeah, that's a title that I once again I was not familiar with. I believe Trauma had put that one out
Yeah.
on
Or
a disc.
distributed at least. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a common misconception. A lot of people think that all Trauma films were made by Trauma. Most of them were not. Trauma
Right.
has their films, but they did a lot of acquisitions, and so sometimes I think people might have a preconceived notion when they see that it's a Trauma release, but no, this was one that Trauma distributed. And yeah, when I found it or discovered it for the first time working here, I'm with you. It was like I was loving it every step of the way. So
Yeah. It's so good. And it has one of the best like getting ready for battle montages I've seen in maybe ever.
yeah, yeah.
And I love that the basic explanation for why she's so good at all this stuff is that she had brothers.
Yeah, it's like they don't even really try to give an explanation. It's like it just goes from like, yep, she's being attacked by these like over the top punk drug addict punks or drug dealing punks. I don't even know what they are, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden,
Yeah.
boom, there she is, just hatchets in hand, going to town. So
But this, so when I guess you haven't seen this yet, but when I do the intro for this episode, one of the statement that I wrote out of like why I want to do a Vinegar Syndrome podcast is I write finding the joy in unfettered creativity. That's kind of
mm,
like the statement that I put. And to me, this is like it's like the perfect example of that because when they wrote the main baddie, first of all, they got I can't remember his name, but he's just a giant of a man. He's a goofy dude, and he plays it so sincere and like
yeah,
so mean. And he's got like a unicorn spike like hat attachment that he uses to impale people's brains as the method of death.
yeah,
And it's just like somebody thought of that, and that's brilliant. Like that could have been in Mad Max, they just didn't think about it.
yeah. No, it's cool. Yeah.
I love it. Anything else about August? So I will admit, I'm actively trying to find someone to come in and talk about merch. I live in a small house. I'm not really a merch person. Y'all have some amazing merch. I might get the Cinematograph shirt. I saw there's some really nice shirts that came out this month. I'm just not really much of a merch guy, so I'm trying to find someone to come in and kind of represent the merch. But anything that that you want to like talk about? I mean, again, not to put you on the spot, but at least to highlight it for a second, I
Yeah,
guess.
no, I mean, yeah, we are always putting out a lot of merch. T-shirts are a big thing. We have an in-house t-shirt company that we work with, and you know, t-shirts are always a big thing. But honestly, like I know it's sort of again another side label for us, but DeGauser, which is our video label,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, we're just film fans, and so we've recently, kind of gotten access to more SOV shot on video films. Now, that doesn't really fit with the Vinegar Syndrome branding, which is generally film preservation, but these films also need, or these, videos, if you will, need preservation, restoration. So we started the Gauser label and we released them on Blu-ray, but also VHS. Now, the VHSs we've released, they work as both collectibles and if you wanted to watch the films, you could. But I think we're all very proud of the boxes that we've done for the Gauser. For anybody who's seen them, it's like there's new artwork. We designed them in a certain way to maximize the amount of artwork on them. And then there's like lights when you lift up the case, and like we kind of went all out on them. And so, I know they are, movies, but I think the especially the VHS also work very well as a collectible and as like merch. So I definitely wanted to highlight those for people who didn't know.
And I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about the movie that DeGauser put out this month is Divinity.
Yes, yes.
And holy cow, like that's another one of those movies where I was just glued to the screen the whole time. That movie's amazing.
Yeah, so Divinity is through our production company, which is VSP.
Yeah.
VSP, we are doing some like in-house productions, but we also have acquired the rights for physical media for like films that are on the festival circuit and all that kind of thing. So Divinity is a newer movie that was produced by Steven Soderbergh. I'm drawing a blank on the director's name right now.
Eddie Alcaraz, I think.
Yes, that's it. Yep. And
Yep.
he made this like crazy black and white sci-fi film that was shot on film. Because again, Vinegar Syndrome Pictures, we want to release and highlight movies, newer movies that were shot on film. But yeah, we decided to do a VHS release for that film, just because we thought it was awesome. We thought it deserved one. DeGauser also through our VHS label, we put out a VHS box set for Divinity, and it's cool. I like it.
I champion that film every chance I get because the last like it's kind of this weird mix where it's a pretty hard R on the sex scenes. Like
Mm,
they don't shy away from. I mean, it's not a triple X movie, but like it's a pretty hard R on the sex scenes.
yeah,
And then it's pretty mean-spirited at times. And then the last 30 minutes is like this something that Ray Harryhausen would make almost. If
yeah,
maybe like Ray Harryhausen's grandson that smoked a little weed or something. I don't know, but like it's just like this it's this really talented stop motion fighting and they're all like on another planet and the baddie's kind of like growing and shrinking and like the two people that are fighting him are they're doing all this crazy choreography and like the blood is really beautiful. It's black and white. I don't know. It's just there's so many. It's almost like a Hong Kong movie in a way. There's so many tonal shifts and there's so many changes in the way the story's told. That when I was writing about it, I was thinking about how to describe it to somebody just reading like a short review, and I was like, if Eddie Alcaraz ever gets a writer, this guy's going to be unstoppable. Because I think the writing in Divinity is a little, I mean, he's a graphic designer by trade. He's not a writer. He's like a visual artist by
yeah.
trade. And it shows because the visuals in that movie I mean, they're amazing. Like Bertrand Mandico's style of just like beautiful. Anyways, I love that film. So I was excited to see the VHS of that. I'm
Yeah,
glad you brought up to Gausser.
cool.
But yeah, I we didn't get into the OCN labels. I've also kept you an hour. I know we
Yeah.
we said we'd do for 20 minutes. I can do those separately. The only thing is there anything that jumps out to you? Because like I was super excited for Soul Brothers and the Lee Chang Don set. I mean, there's some really great release
Yeah.
titles coming out this month.
Yeah, so I mean, the only thing I can really say with OCN is, those films generally we don't do. I think I said this before. We don't really do a lot of the restoration for any of those.
Okay.
There's usually done through whatever company is releasing them.
Okay.
So I OCN isn't really my department. So actually, the best thing that I can say about OCN is I myself am very excited to see when the movies come in. I don't know. I don't always know what we're putting out until they
That's
come in the
awesome.
door. And so, like, working here, we're surrounded by movies all the time, and it's actually exciting to see what some of the partner labels are putting out. So, things will come into our shipping department. I'm like, oh, wait, we're putting this out? Like, oh my God, that's awesome. So, yeah, I can't speak too much on the OCN stuff, but definitely keep an eye on our partner labels because there are some amazing titles coming out. So,
Well, just Film Movement Classics alone is putting out Lee Chang-dong, Asia Argento, and then uh, what's the it's a famous Italian Visconti,
mm,
Gino Visconti.
mhm.
Like again, like not to just gush. I mean, I guess I can gush because it's a Vinegar Syndrome podcast. But like that's why I love the label so much. Is it's like I can go to one website and I can get a Visconti movie and I can get Mexican slasher film with guns and like I can get a British horror comedy like in the same checkout,
Yeah.
and I don't know, I love it. Like it's obvious y'all are fans of film first, and like I love all the sub labels, and it's bad for my wallet, but what are you gonna do? So
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
yeah, well, Curtis, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. This was fun. I hope we could do it again.
Oh yeah, I hope so.
Everyone has a secret nightmare about the ugliest way to die. Whatever yours may be, now it lives.
What are you yelling about?
Little people!
If you take them in, you'll be taken in, because there is no way to survive the devil times 5.
Okay. Wow. Well, Curtis was awesome. That was amazing. And I have to say, I didn't give him a lot of prep. I asked him a couple days before, so just super appreciative that he was able to come on and do that. And I hope anybody listening got some good background on those movies. Again, just what a cool month from Vinegar Syndrome. There's two things I want to do quickly. So one of the ones I want to try to highlight a back catalog film because as we were talking about with Curtis, they're at to movie 475 and 477. So there's a ton of back catalog stuff that probably doesn't get as much love as it should. So I want to try to highlight that. This segment's called Human Tornado. And the reason I call it Human Tornado is because they released that movie and they released Rudy Ray Moore box set actually. And it was one of these movies that I kind of caught and I was like, God, Vinegar Syndrome is just amazing. Like there's a lot of debate over the best Rudy Ray Moore film. I would listen to an argument of anything that he did. For me, it's Human Tornado just because it's goofy and it's so funny. And I think he's at his kind of most charming and funniest there. And the whole joke with Human Tornado is that when he has sex, he destroys the room because he's so good. Anyways, go watch Rudy Ray Moore films if you haven't. But that's not what we're talking about today. That's just why this segment's called that. I want to try to highlight some of the great stuff they released in the past. So, what I want to talk about today is an Ozploitation movie called Body Melt. You heard Curtis talk about it a little bit. 1993. There's this guy named Philip Brophy in Australia. It's a little difficult to pin down exactly what this guy is, but he started basically like an artist kind of consortium, and they did everything. They did music. He started a group called Tisk Tisk Tisk. I think that's the way that people kind of talk about it. When it's written down, it's like right arrow, up arrow, right arrow, or something like that. It's very experimental. He's been, he's a graphic designer, he's a filmmaker, he's a writer, he's a composer, he's all these things. And people call him the Australian Andy Warhol. He's also a professor and an academic, so he's just a fascinating character, Philip Brophy. A ton of work outside of movies, but he made one film, got financed by an Australian financier, and it's called Body Melt, and it's one of the grossest movies I've ever seen. But Body Melt is awesome. It's super gross. We were talking about it again with Curtis. You just heard that, but pretty good comparison to Society. The basic premise is kind of prescient in a way. It's that people are taking these nutrition pills and they don't really know what's in them. And it turns out what's inside of them turns their body inside out. And so what you have is you have a lot of like boiling skin, festering pus. You've got a lot of oozing, if you think of like the grossest kind of images that you can conjure up of a body decomposing from the inside quickly. That's what happens to people that take this pill. Everybody reacts to it slightly differently. So some people have like I don't even know how to describe it, like tentacles coming out of their mouth, kind of almost like there's a creature inside of them. Super gross. Fun movie. Also, like Society, it's kind of lighthearted and funny. I would say first, rather than just being straight gross out. It's a movie that I think you have to see. If you're okay with the more squeamish side of things, it's a movie that you have to see. I don't know that Brophy did that much more. I don't think he did that many films, like feature films. But where I would kind of take you, rather than say go look for other Brophy films, is to go dig into Ozploitation. Obviously, there's a partner label called Umbrella. It focuses on Ozploitation. They have a ton of stuff that's in their catalog that's fantastic. Um, but Body Melt is one that's released through the main line of Vinegar Syndrome, and I didn't know that detail. It's one of the first '90s movies they made, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's one that if you can find it streaming, obviously first to check it out. That's always recommended. But I would say it's one it's okay to take a chance on, as long as you're okay with some of the gross side, because it is very gross. It's 100% a body horror movie, and more just on the slimy, kind of oozy, pussy side of that. So know what you're getting into, but I think it's fantastic. I thought it was very good, very entertaining, a lot of fun, and as always, the actual Blu-ray release is stacked with features. There's at least 2 commentaries, if not 3, and one of them is with the whole team. It's like the producer, director, writer, and then one of them I think is just the director. But because I think it's talking about the music, because he's a composer as well as being a filmmaker. So yeah, look, Body Melt 1993. Oh, it is titled, if you're into spines, it is Spine 243. Still available on the standard edition. The limited edition is long out of print. I think it goes for a silly dollar amount. So just get the standard or watch it online somewhere. And then I want to do one more segment here. I'm going to call it Convincing Holly. And what I want to do with this segment is find a movie that sounds like it would be a tough watch. And it's something that would not be for, let's say you're not the kind of person that likes torture, or you're not the kind of person that likes a lot of really rough stuff in the films, or maybe for some reason the film just sounds difficult to watch, but the movie's still worth watching. And so I'm going to try to, I don't know if I'm going to do this every month. I'm going to try to, but I want to try to find a film that sounds rough, but is not and should be watched. And thought about this because Holly is somebody I watch a lot of movies with, and we talk a lot about films, and she's more on the squeamish side. And I thought it would be a fun kind of segment to have here, and also wanted to talk about these movies most importantly. So the first one I want to talk about is Chinese Torture Chamber Story. Okay, the title I think sums up what this segment is all about. And you definitely heard Kurtis talking about it, so I'm not going to go on for 20 minutes on this because he did a pretty good job of breaking it down. Is there torture in the movie? Yes, there is. Is it, the main reason to watch this movie? Hell no. This movie is a comedy first. It's a sex comedy. It's a horny comedy. It's a very horny comedy. And it is funny. I was stunned with how funny this movie is. I would say the first 5 minutes is probably where most people that are squeamish would turn it off, because it starts with torture. But you can either fast forward or just, honestly, it's not even that bad, I don't think, but you can tell me if I'm dead inside. I don't think it's that bad. But once the movie kicks in, I should say it's a Category 3 film. If you don't know what Category 3 is, I would say the longer definition, it's there's a million websites that talk about it, but the short version is it's NC-17 for Hong Kong. And rather than in the US, getting an NC-17 is a little bit of a scarlet letter, but over there it became almost like a challenge that a lot of artists accepted. And there was just a bunch of amazing films in this category that got that rating from the government. So some of the famous ones are like Ricky-O, for example. Everybody talks about the story of Ricky-O. That's Ebola syndrome is another one. These kind of over the top, funny. There's usually a lot of violence, but it's usually over the top and pretty, like geysers of blood or buckets of, gore, but it's done in a more lighthearted kind of, almost like a manga style. Chinese Torture Chamber Story is not that. This is just a very horny comedy, and it's in a weird way kind of a surprisingly wholesome movie as well, which I wasn't expecting. But it's essentially about this. I don't even know what not a king, but he's like he's like a ruler in the area, and he brings in this woman. He has a wife, but his wife's having an affair, and they're not really happy in the bedroom. And he kind of gets eyes for this woman that he brings into his court, and they never actually consummate the relationship, but um, a lot of people think they do, and that leads to a trial, and that leads to some of the torture, because the way that they got truth out of people back in those, in the ancient China, I guess, was through torture. So that's where some of the torture comes from, is when they're trying to get information from the woman, and also from the Lord, the guy that kind of is the leader of that area. But what happens in the movie is just so hilarious, and it like, for example, there's he walks through a series of sex toys with his wife. That scene alone had me chuckling, had me going. There's uh, this is what Curtis was talking about. I hope you know what wuxia is. If not, you want to look it up. It's Wuxia. It's that wire work style of kind of choreography and fighting in a lot of Chinese and Hong Kong films, where they're kind of floating through the forest or floating through the sky. And it's very graceful, very, operatic kind of ballet, very beautiful. And there's a X-rated wuxia scene in this film that comes out of nowhere, and it's long. It's equally funny as the scene in Team America where they had the puppets have sex. It's equally kind of random and funny and brilliant, and maybe this one's even better, to be honest. It just I was lying. I was dying. I was laughing so hard at this, and the whole movie is kind of like that. It's just this hilarious movie. If you're more on the squeamish side, fast forward past the 3 minutes of torture and just sit back and enjoy a hilarious film. Chinese Torture Chamber Story #2, I would not recommend. It's a little rougher, but the first one is one of my favorite movies now. It's a classic. Y'all, we did it. Episode 1 in the books. Please, I'm gonna post this on my socials. Find me there. Tell me how it was. Tell me what you wanted to hear more about, less about. If you're into merch, please contact me. I'd love to give you a segment. Otherwise, let's just make this into something great. I want the Vinegar Syndrome community to have a place to come and kind of, I guess, have a central place to discuss what's coming out and learn about the releases and hear from Vinegar Syndrome themselves. And based on the conversation today, it sounds like we're going to be able to start to get the Vinegar Syndrome engaged, which is great. Yeah, we'd just love to build this with y'all and make something wonderful. So thank you so much for listening, if you've listened this far, and see you around the 15th of the month with a breakdown of all the movies that came out in July.